What if the thing keeping you stuck isn't a lack of hustle? What if the real problem is that you've been taught to work hard, grind longer, and carry more, when what you actually need is a better system?
Because a lot of people think that freedom comes from making more money. But what if freedom actually comes from building something that doesn't constantly depend on you to survive?
That's exactly what we're getting into today. Because our guest, Tyrus Shivers, has a story that will hit a lot of people right in the chest. He came from very little, fought through real adversity, built multiple businesses, learned hard lessons the painful way, and now helps entrepreneurs understand how to actually scale with structure, systems, and access to capital.
And this is one of those conversations that goes way beyond business. Because even if you're not trying to raise money or build a company, the bigger questions still matter. How do you stop living in survival mode and start building a life that actually gives you room to breathe?
In this episode, we talk about what most entrepreneurs get wrong, why hustle alone can trap you, and how systems create freedom, why so many people are trying to grow before they're even truly ready.
And later in the conversation, we get into the most interesting parts: how small business owners can think differently about capital, leverage, and opportunities in ways most people have never even heard.
So, whether you're building a business, chasing financial independence, or just trying to stop feeling like life is one long scramble, this episode is going to make you think.
This is episode 189 with Tyrus Shivers. Let's get into it.
Freedom doesn't come from hustle alone. It comes from systems, leverage, and access. Many of us were taught to work hard, save, grind, and bootstrap. Tyrus's message challenges that by saying hustle without systems can trap you, and capital without readiness can destroy you. Tyrus Shivers, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Glad to be here.
I'm glad that you're here as well. So, Tyrus, one thing that stood out to me at our earlier conversation before we hit the camera to start recording is that you're not just talking about making more money and growing faster. What we're really talking about is freedom and how most people are taught to chase the wrong things and the wrong way. So I want to start with your story because I think that's where this whole philosophy most likely begins.
Yeah, 100%. So my story is vast. I will give you all the Campbell soup version. So I'm not sitting here doing a monologue for 2 hours. But at about 8 years old, I came to a realization that, my father was in prison. My mom was working two jobs, and everybody in my family worked hard. And when I say hard, I'm from South Alabama. So the only real opportunity was factory work. And these are 12, 15-hour days, or rig work, 12, 15-hour days, but there was no real wealth. And so it wasn't just that you worked hard and you were okay. It was you work hard and you still are trying to figure out how do you put food on the table? How do you get access to parks, events, clothes, shoes, all those things that we see as being necessities came difficult, but everybody worked hard. So I told my mom, and she's still a big supporter of mine today, and everybody can go and ask her. I told her at that age that, I'm going to work different. I'm not going to work hard as you. No disrespect. But from there, it kind of shaped my journey of thinking different. How can I get more done with less, which is what we call efficiency? And as I began to go through high school, I did really well, got a full scholarship to Tuskegee University and some other schools. I did go to Tuskegee and lost my scholarship pledging. So if you're in the college phase, finish school, do the right thing. And from there, I went to do the thing that I said I wasn't going to do, work hard. I went to UPS and worked nights, unloading and loading trucks. And then I worked for my cousin who owned an HVAC company in the daytime. So 12-hour days, 8 hours HVAC, 4 hours overnight UPS. So I did the very thing that I said I wouldn't do. And guess what? I ain't have any money. So it's like I'm in the same boat. And as I began to think about that, I was like, what is the best way for me to get out of this? And my uncle, my aunt's husband, he is from Trinidad. And when he gave his story, dirt poor, tin roofs, growing up in a third world country, he came here to the US and then went into the Air Force. And he always said that the Air Force was good to him. So I did the thing. Instead of starting a business like we would think I would do, I went into the Air Force. And I was planning to do a 20-year career in the military. However, I was medically retired at 2 years, 6 months in, which for the audience listening, sometimes you have to be ready to pivot because you may plan out 10, 15, 20 years of your life and it be taken away from you in an instant. From there, I went into GovCon work doing system integration engineering, system administration work, and I'm still making pretty good money, but working hard, not as hard as my family, but I wasn't creating wealth. And that's when around 2014, I got into real estate investing. And I built a property management company from zero to about 1.2 million in 18 months with a great mentor. And as I scaled that business and began to grow it, people wanted to know how. And that led me to consulting work. And from consulting work, I got to work with a lot of great brands, a lot of influencers. And that led me to a capital raising journey by meeting my partners at an event, which leads me to here today with Legacy Wealth Capital Group.
Wow, it sounds like you've lived through a lot of instability, through service in the Air Force, entrepreneurship, loss, a forced reinvention. Tyrus, what's been the connecting thread amongst all of those things that kept you going through the hard times?
The connecting thread goes back to family. It goes back to me sitting around with my great grandfather, my grandmother, my mother, to listen to the stories of my great grandfather being born in 1919, chopping cotton at 8 years old. My grandma, his daughter, picking cotton. I remember she used to say they would make $10 per 100 pounds of cotton that they picked. When I think about going through things in life, I look back at them and I say, you know what? I've been through a lot, but I can't even imagine surviving what they survived in the Jim Crow South and going through what they went through. But they never had an excuse. There was never a, we want the government to take care of us. We deserve that this be given to us. We were taught to work and to stand on your own feet and not complain. I never heard them complain. And I used to ask my grandma as I got older, you never got tired? And she was like, that wasn't a thing. Yes, we got tired, but you didn't say that. You just did what you had to do. And so as I went through my journey of ups and downs, ebbs and flows, I remembered that I'm standing on shoulders of people who went through so much more than me. And what I'm going through, I can come back from losing money, maybe losing a career path, but I still have my life and the ability to reinvent myself and keep going forward.
You really gave me chills. It's one of the saddest things that I see nowadays is this nihilistic tendency that I feel like many young people are kind of prescribing to, and that things have never been harder. Things are so terrible. It's like, go read a book. Like read literally any book of history, and like you'll realize that things may not be perfect, but we live in the best of times. Like there are not many times. Like if you gave me a map and said, or time history and said like choose any times, I'm probably gonna choose the 1990s. But other than that, like I'm not gonna choose anything else.
100%.
So do you feel that this is? I mean, it sounds like you've been able to really look to your family, to your ancestors' history to be able to get you through those dark times. Do you think that's something that's required for people to be able to remember that you come from a lineage of people that made it through hard stuff and that's the only reason that you are existing today?
I think that it's a requirement to know your roots because if you're to grow, anything that grows has roots. And if it's growing from the ground and is deeply embedding itself, you got to know where that comes from. You got to know what soil that is, as they used to say back in the day. What stock are you from? And that's just from the cattle industry. A great head of cattle or cow comes from good stock. A great horse comes from good stock or a racehorse. And so, us as individual people, I think sometimes, and this could be a whole different conversation, Chris, we lose sight of our ecosystem and our own culture and identity, and we just assume the one of the masses. Yet we don't know how to look back and say, you know what, this is my heritage, and this is how I build on that. And we're too busy sometimes looking into the future. But if you don't know the past, you're bound to repeat the past. We've all heard that. And it's so true because you just make the same mistakes that people have made before you, or try to skip pieces and parts that will help sharpen you, all because you don't know. And so even with my kids, I start giving them lessons like, yeah, you don't have to go through anything that your ancestors went through, but you need to at least know so you don't take it or you don't squander the opportunity that you have in front of you. And sometimes I think it's easy to woe is me and squander opportunities and not take advantage of everything we have today that's available because we don't know how hard it was.
I want to stay on this thread a little bit more because I definitely want to get into the business and want to get into the entrepreneurship. But I feel that if somebody doesn't have the mindset, and that mindset is going to, I think that the largest detriment to that mindset is the woe is me, the I'm the victim. Anytime that I try something, somebody, government, God, my mom is out to get me or to hurt me. When in truth, like the common thread amongst all those things is that you are there and you're the one who is determining that no matter what happens, it's going to be the worst thing. So how does someone get over that feeling of malaise, that concern that I'm being held back by somebody else?
Yeah, I love this question and I love what you said because the common thread is that individual. And I used to work with Eric Thomas, the motivational speaker, and he started saying this thing. He was like, you ain't there because you ain't there. It's like you gotta get yourself to the place to where you want to be. It's nobody else's fault. And so really when we think about mindset, which is it's the everything. Without mindset, you just cannot obtain or either achieve success. And so, how do you get through that? By reading, by researching, by getting an understanding and a self awareness of who you are, what you like, by unplugging sometimes and taking yourself away from the internet, social media, even television, radio, because all of that's programming. Everybody that puts something out, they're putting it out for a purpose. And now, we're the product.
Mhm.
We're the thing that your attention is what people are pulling towards. And so for an individual listening and you're like, what do I do? And all these things are going wrong. Yeah, it's called life. Les Brown used to say it's just called life. But how do you navigate life? What skills are you building up to navigate life? What's in your toolbox? Personal development, self awareness, authenticity, just education and learning in general, experiencing and trying new things, failing fast. Like all of these begin to be tools in your toolkit to say, I'm going to take this opportunity. And hey, if it doesn't work out, I like to also bring in, Chris, that just working in military operations and some of the jobs that I've done, they were life and death. So it gives me a different perspective of when people fail or when they have this, oh, it's all terrible. It's like, no, you're alive. And so we need to, and that goes back to thinking outside of your box. Some people are putting everything on the line every day and they can make a mistake and not come back from it. You can make mistakes and come back from them. And as long as you can do that, you can try again for a different outcome.
Yeah. I come from a military family. My father was a Marine, stayed in till he retired after 22 years. My mom was in the Army. One of my first jobs, and of course it has nothing to do with the military, was I was a lifeguard at the beach. And I remember a bad day for us would be we lost somebody. Like somebody did
Yeah.
not go home to their family. And that really put it in perspective for me for what work was. And I remember after I left that job, I went into sales and someone would be like, "Oh, my whole day's ruined, my week's ruined because I didn't get that sale. Like it's over." It's like, man, it's not over. Like you get to go home to your wife, you get home to your kids, like you get to try again tomorrow. Like my first job was over, was like somebody's life was legitimately gone.
Yeah, that's powerful. And the more people realize that, the more they'll be able to bounce back. And today is becoming even more of a problem of resiliency. there's this expectation that since we live in a more technologically advanced world, we have better access to healthcare and medicine and all of these things, that life should be easier. But it's not. It is still very difficult to navigate. And you have to put on your armor. You have to exercise. This is a fight to get through life. And some people listen to maybe say, well, maybe it shouldn't be that way. There's nowhere in history where it wasn't.
Mhm.
It was always hard. It was always something that you were overcoming as a human being on this planet. It was always you had to work in order to get a thing to come back to you. So I don't know where we've entered into this mindset of it should just appear and be ready for me. And if it doesn't, oh my God, the world is over. No, you're supposed to be developing resiliency, character, and strengthening yourself. So when issues do come, you handle them a different way.
Yeah, you used a word there, strength, and I think a lot of people though they hear that word nowadays and they think like, oh, that's bad. Strength equates to power, and power means that you're subjugating another person, and if you're subjugating another person, that means that you're a bad person. But in truth, I think it comes a lot from for the past say 100 years, or I guess after World War II, there really has not been much of countries invading one another. Like the systems of power have always been the strong will enforce their strength on the weak, and the weak will suffer as they must. And it wasn't until Russia invaded Ukraine that we realized, like, oh my God, the system that we thought was in play for the past 60, 70 years has actually been not the norm. Because the
Hmm.
norm has always been power over other people and constant fighting, constantly trying to acquire more and more and more. And regardless if that's the way the world should be, that's the way the world is. So don't complain about the way the world is and try to replace it and work to replace it with the way it ought to be.
Yeah, that's really good. And that gives a different perspective of going back to what we're talking about, educating yourself and broadening your viewpoint. And if were a student of history, you would know that. And it wouldn't be such a surprise. And for us to be surprised and shocked, again, we're not self studying, we just consume information that's given to us. And so, whoever wills the communication power, to your point, that's what you listen to. That's what you feed into, and that's what dominates your life. But if you just pick up, we have access to all information in the world in a way that's never been done before, and even more so today than when the internet first came out. But less people are using it to that. They're using it to play. I like games. I want to go scroll, but they're not using it to enrich their lives or enrich themselves. And if they would just do that, they will find a different perspective. You would take yourself out of the rat race. You would get out of the matrix, if you will. You would be able to unplug like that whole movie, The Matrix. Now, if you watch it today, it is very clear on where we are and what we've transitioned to from what that actually is, because we're living in the matrix. We might not be plugged in an artificial world, but most people are plugged right into a phone. It's attached to their hand.
It's funny you mentioned The Matrix. That's one of my favorite movies for kind of speaking about life. A little bit about me. I study Buddhism and Taoism and Stoicism, and one of the biggest things from Buddhism is, all of it is a simulation, or and not like a simulation that we really are, but no matter what, you're always going to go through things, experience things in your brain through your frame of reference, and your matrix that you're plugged into is different than everyone else's because
Hmm.
you're always going to process whatever happens in the external world, whatever objective truth is, through your subjective through your brain that is perceived through your touch, your smell, your sight, mainly your sight, to be able to formulate the world around you, just like Neo was when he was plugged into the Matrix.
I actually like that because, again, to your point, that goes back to the psychological foundation of TFAR: thoughts, feelings, action, and results. So inherently, things in the world aren't good or bad. It is how we perceive and utilize them that turns them into good or bad. Money is not good or bad. It's a tool. It's a thing. Uh, Certain plants aren't good or bad. Is how you chemicalize them and then they turn into something else. But your thoughts, if you think deeply about something, really truly deeply about it, that creates and generates feelings. And out of your feelings, you take some sort of action. And out of those actions, you get results. Didn't say good or bad. It's what you ruminate on. If I'm thinking bad things and I start feeling a certain kind of way, it might be anger, it might be hurt, it might be some negative feeling. I'm going to take action on that feeling and then I may get a wrong result. And
Yeah.
so if I do a reverse of that and I think really strongly, like I can see myself in my ideal life, my ideal situation, then I start to feel those things. And as I feel it, now I want to take action, and not just any action. To borrow from Tony Robbins, you got to take massive action. Then you'll get a massive result.
I like that. When you say massive action, I think that's going to be probably subjective to everybody as to what massive means. How would Tony describe that for what a massive thing should be for the individual listening to this podcast?
It is really just breaking your cycle. It may be, to your point, it may be something small to me to break my cycle, something small. I just need to go outside. Maybe I've been inside all day with no sunlight and I'm feeling kind of depressed. Maybe that massive action is just getting up and walking outside and getting some sunlight. For someone else, it might be betting it all on a business idea. For someone else, it may be leaving their 9 to 5. It may be going back to their 9 to 5. So every individual has to pick, what is my cycle? And again, goes back to awareness, being aware of where you are. Most of us are not aware that we're in a cycle. We might feel like every day is the same, but what does that really mean? And do we sit enough and think deeply about what is the same every day? And what can I do to change it?
And when someone comes to that realization for the moment that they finally, wake up, when they're maybe enlightened for a moment and they realize I am in this repetitive cycle that may be of my own causing. You said to take a massive jump, but I feel like that's usually too large for somebody. What's usually the first step to even making that massive moment?
Yeah, that first step is recognition. Second step is thinking or having a desire to want something different. And then making that first incremental step. What is that thing? If I'm a cigarette smoker, it may just not be lighting that cigarette at that moment. It may be not buying the next pack. It may be turning down someone who's offering me one. We all have to look at and determine, for me, what is that thing that I need to transition into? And also, Chris, I like to push back on people sometimes that tell me, you know what, that's scary. Well, that's the point, because your comfortability is what's got you stuck. It's supposed to be scary. If you're doing something new and you're getting out of your cycle, and the way our mind and our brains and our psychology, the way we're wired for protection, even if it's bad for you, your brain and your subconscious, if it's going to keep you in the familiar. So to break that, it's going to feel like you're going against the world. That's massive action. You're willing to break the mental cycle that's going to try to tell you, nope, don't do that. Nope, you shouldn't do that. That's not what we do every day. But the moment you're able to get out of it and start to build new habits, and that's why most people are really, they struggle with breaking bad habits, because you don't break a habit, you replace. You can't just stop doing something without putting a replacement in there.
Mhm.
That's why a lot of smokers eat things. They start chew gum. They put things in their hands to move around, because that's something that they're used to doing. So in order to shift habits, you have to start and form new habits, and that takes time.
Yeah. When we opened up this conversation at the beginning, you were talking a lot about not wanting to work so hard, just like you did, like your family did, like your ancestors did. So I'd like to pivot the conversation a little bit away from mindset, but still kind of keep it in there as a nice transition. And what was the biggest lie that you believed, that you feel that society's entrepreneurs, workers believe about hard work?
They believe that if you work hard, you will become wealthy. And
And is
there's
that no
no,
longer true?
it was never true. I don't know anybody that worked hard from the early 1800s, and I'm just thinking about our country from 1700s, 18, 19. Know anybody that worked hard that became massively wealthy? And I hear them in the audience saying, "Well, everybody doesn't want to be wealthy. Everybody wants to be comfortable. Everybody wants to know that they're getting what they put in, they're getting back out." And sometimes, and I can almost guarantee most people feel like they're not. They're living day to day, paycheck to paycheck. And so when we're thinking about that lie, go to school, get a good education, get a good paying job, you'll be wealthy. The picket fence life is gone. The 70s are over. You're not surviving anymore. But for me, I realized a long time ago, that's not true. Because if that was true, everybody would be rich that worked hard. And it's just not. And I think that the working hard doesn't mean that you don't work, or it doesn't mean that I'm opposed to putting in long hours. I believe there are seasons in life, and you should be able to transition between seasons. But that I'm just day in, day out, 12 hours, 15 hours a day, and I'm not getting ahead in life. That's working hard to no end.
Yeah. For our listeners that are just hearing us, not seeing us, the reason I asked the question that way of is it not true anymore, is hard work doesn't work anymore, was to see what you would say, Tyrus, and you answered it perfectly. What I wanted our audience to remember is that it was never like that. Like, regardless of the story you're telling yourself, it was never, I just work hard and it works out for me. But I think people are going to hear that and say, okay, so if I don't work hard to find success, then what is it that I need to do?
Yeah. I don't even like the adage of work smarter, not harder. I need you to work effectively. I need you to find, based on your goals, your vision, and that goes back to mindset. None of this works without a vision. Where are you 20 years from now? What is your ideal life? What did you sit down at the table with your family, with your wife, your kids, or your spouse? Or if you don't have a spouse and it's just you, your board of directors, your family, your friends, those that you can hold in confidence. Where are you going to be and what do you want out of life? That's step number one. Because without that, we don't know what to tell you. Like people come to me and say, "Hey, can you fix these problems?" Like, I don't know. I don't know what you want. So once you determine where you're gonna live, do you want to travel often? Type of food do you want to eat? What's the weather like there? Are you on a porch? Are you on a beach? Are you skiing? All of those things. When you determine what that is, how do you effectively and efficiently get there? What is the plan? Maybe it's just a $250,000, $500,000 a year job. Maybe it's a $60,000 a year job that'll get you there. Or maybe it's massive wealth. Depends on how much impact you want to make in the world, because wealth can create impact. Wealth is a tool to impact and transform lives. If you want to make local impact, you only need a little bit of money. If you want to make global impact, you need a whole lot of money. And so that is the determining factor for me of I don't want to work hard. I don't necessarily want to work smart. I want to be efficient in what I do, because once I'm effective and I make that efficient, that's going to compound my efforts. And that's going to keep me working smarter versus working harder.
You know, I'm a financial advisor and a financial coach, and people come to me asking me usually a million different questions, but in truth, they're asking really two questions: is how much is enough, and am I going to be okay? And just like you said there, the answer is, well, it depends. What are you trying to get to? Where's your goal? And I feel that most people have zero idea. In fact, normally the answer they say is, $1 million is usually one of the first things I'll hear, or retire at 65, which, it's almost like going to a kid and being like, how much money do you need to retire? And they'll say like 16 candy bars. It's almost the exact same thing of how silly it is, because they haven't actually envisioned like, what is it that I'm going towards? But at least when someone says $1 million, we as all adults just be like, okay, that sounds reasonable, but it's no more reasonable than saying 16 candy bars. Like, without knowing your goals or where you're going towards, who the hell knows?
Yeah. And I think that's the society working. I think as I hear everybody else saying, if you got $1 million, you're okay. And then the next thing you hear is, well, a million isn't enough to retire off of. You need 5 million to be okay. And so that becomes the number. We don't actually sit down and think about what's our number for me, for my family, for what I want to do, not what the general number is of you may be safe if you have this. Like my lifestyle may change unexpectedly. I may have a kid when I'm 50 or 60 years old unexpectedly. So we got to really think about personalizing everything that we do and not just internalizing what everybody else around us is doing.
Yeah. And that's where I find the second question of, will I be okay, comes in. It's, I don't know. Will you be okay? Do you have the tenacity, the ability to adapt to whatever comes? Because we might be able to build this plan for how much is enough, but you could have a kid at 60, you can get sick, the government could seize your wealth. Like anything can happen. Will you be okay? Only you can determine that. So if our listeners are hearing this and they're saying, all right, Tyrus, I want to be effective. I want to not be just a person that works hard and tries to grind to get where I want to go, but they don't even know where to begin to become effective. Maybe they can envision where they want to be in 20 years, but they have zero idea of how they connect the gap from where they are today to where they want to be. Where would you recommend someone begin that journey?
Yeah. After you had that moment of realization and you know that this is not the life that I want to live, I'm going to take not through theory, but through my own journey. Once I realized that, yeah, I make some decent money, it will never give me wealth. I started looking for different avenues. In 2014, real estate was the avenue. It still is to some respects, but that was really when the flipping and the wholesaling and all that was huge. 2008 was the crash, started to recover over a few years. By the time 2014-ish hit, it was hot. That's back when everybody was wanting to get into it. Everybody's a real estate investor. My first step was to study it, to learn it, because my model is I believe you should have mentors. I believe you should have coaches, people in your sphere that's doing what you want to do, but you don't ever go to them without doing some level of homework because that's called hand holding. You want somebody now to give you what they've earned for free, and you didn't even take consideration or just to do some of the legwork. After you've researched and you feel like, okay, I found maybe an avenue that fits my personality, fits my style, who around me is doing this work? Who's someone I can look up to? And then go up and ask a plan, or with a plan and ask, okay, here's my framework. What do you think about it? Can you help me? Do you know someone who can help me? And then work your way through trying something. Doesn't matter what it is, try it. I tried real estate and was very successful at it, but real estate was not a passion of mine. And so I let it go. And that's okay. That's not failure. And even if it didn't go right, that's okay. That's not failure. I tried it. It didn't work out. I moved on to something else. So you have to start taking these steps of surrounding yourself with different minded or like minded people who are working on. I believe you should be in 3 groups. You should be in a group where you're slightly ahead so you can pull people with you. You should be in a peer group of everybody on the same level and helping. And you should be in a group where you're at the bottom so they can pull you up. So it's a lot of, again, going back to the beginning of that conversation, we talked a lot about family, but it's also a lot about community. Can't do this alone, and you shouldn't do this alone. So after you've had that realization, if I condensed everything I just said, find the right community to be a part of. That way you can begin to walk these steps with other people in an ecosystem, and then you'll begin to find your path. There's no true ecosystem that operates with a solo person.
Mhm.
And we're all just small communities that are a part of a larger picture. And we can look at our Asian communities. We can look at our Jewish community. We can look at our white community. We can look at our East Asians or Arabs or Muslim community, all of these are communities. And once you find your community, your ecosystem and build, then you begin to connect with other ecosystems. But don't do it alone and start closest to you. A lot of us want to run out and join things that are far away from us because we feel like it's a far away from where we come from. But no, there are people right where you are that are trying to build. And if you build together, then you'll be able to go out further and make more impact.
Yeah. Something I found a lot is some people, they come from or they currently are in just terrible ecosystems. And they're saying like, I like to always, I always like the analogy of alligators and kittens. You could be in a room and there's alligators and there's kittens in there. And people are saying like, I'm just going to introduce more kittens. Well, until you get those alligators out of that room, it doesn't matter how many kittens you introduce. It's not going to go the way you want it to.
Mhm.
And I use that analogy for, if you're in an ecosystem or in a group of people and everyone you surround yourself with are those alligators, you're just saying, I'm just going to bring in more kittens into my life and people that are good, the people that are trying to build me up. But I'm not getting rid of those alligators. They're just going to keep on consuming them and not going to get anywhere. So I think it's sometimes very hard for people to hear and come to the realization that maybe in order to move forward, I have to shed the weight that have been just been dragging me down in the form of the people that I've surrounded myself with.
Yeah, I give you a saying that I've used to hear old Southern people say, and that's you have to feed some people with a long handled spoon. Doesn't mean you stop feeding them, doesn't mean you disconnect. What it does mean is you create boundaries. And so, yes, some of us come from really tough backgrounds, tough homes, tough ecosystems. You don't fully have to disconnect and just break away. But what you have to do is create a boundary. And once you create that boundary, when you are firm in your boundaries, people respect that. They may not like it, they may talk about you, but they respect it at the end of the day. And if you go and then start to build and come back and offer, some will take it, others may not. You won't save everybody. And that's okay. That everybody has to make a choice for their own life. But I believe that you can feed with a long handled spoon, still stay connected in a way, but go off and receive and bring information and take it back. I live that every day because the way Alabama works is different. I'm in Maryland now, but the mindset of Alabama and when you go further south, it's totally different. The
Mhm.
ecosystems are different. The way you navigate and move is different. And it's very tough to break those mindsets. It's very tough to enter new ideas into an ecosystem that's thrived a certain way, even when it's killing them, even
Yeah.
when you're lagging behind the country, even when business and all these things that we're talking about don't necessarily exist for most people. They still don't see it. But that doesn't mean you give up. And every now and then, you'll have a breakthrough. It just takes time, energy, effort, and consistency to give it.
Yeah. You mentioned something that I've been working on a lot, and I would love for you to define it or maybe give an example for our listeners. But, sometimes when you have those people in your life, you said you need to introduce boundaries. Could you expand upon that idea more? Like, what does that actually mean? What does that look like in practice?
I love it. Great question. Boundaries are personal. So here's one of my boundaries: communication. For some people, I can have a longer conversation, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. For some people, it's a hey, how you doing? Great. I'll talk to you next week. That's it. That's the boundary. We can only talk for so long because I know that if the conversation goes, it's going to be negativity. It's going to be, oh, this is going on, or, oh, did you hear about this drama, or can you loan me some money? And I'm not even trying to get there. So let me do 2 minutes with you, check in, see how everybody's doing. Great. Let's move on. Another boundary is just how you want to be treated, how you want people to speak to you. Like, and I get it. We all have different personalities. Some of us are a little bit more direct than others. I'm a very direct person, and I lead with that. And I love to tell people I actually had a call with an auditor, my audit financials, going through audit financials earlier. And I said, I know that I am rough sounding in email, but believe me, it's nothing personal. I lead with my boundaries. I don't want you wasting my time. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to disrespect you. You're not going to disrespect me. I'm not going to argue with you. It won't even be a conversation. I'm going to give you some feedback. I just want direct and honest feedback back to me. And you're not going to hurt my feelings. I got thick skin. I tell a lot of clients, I won't lose no sleep at night if you mad at me. It doesn't make me any difference. For everybody listening, you have to find your own way to push your boundaries out there and make them known. A lot of people I know internalize their boundaries and people don't know, but then they just get closed off and they're upset, and it's an internal upset, and it really just eats you up because they don't
Mhm.
know. They're not aware. They may see your mood change and that's it, but just be vocal. You don't have to be nasty. You can be really tactful about setting boundaries for you. And those boundaries really stem from your ideal life, how you want to live. I want to be peaceful. I want to be consistent. I want to be stable. And I want to be honest. I want to have integrity. And so anything that crosses that boundary, I cut it off and just don't deal with it. Or I keep a very limited dealing and make sure I'm aware that if I let these people in, this person in too far, it can rob me of my core values. So they need to stop at this gate and just, I'll talk to you through the screen door, but I won't necessarily unlock it.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. For our listeners that have made it to this point in the podcast, what I fear a lot, what ends up happening a lot with especially my podcast is we talk a lot about the mindsets, what you need to do in order to get where you want to go. But I feel like we're moving in a society of people where they want the information now. They just want to go fast. And I think that's sometimes very, very dangerous. So now that we're at this point in the podcast, let's move it over to business and kind of use that as a jumping off point for what are some business fundamentals that people often skip because they want to go fast.
They skip the very foundation of what business is. Business is ultimately a reflection of you. You got a messy house, messy insides, your business is going to be messy. If you can't keep your own personal finances together, your business finances are going to struggle unless you're hiring CPAs, CFOs, people to manage that money. That's one of the things I see them skip. I also see them, and I don't blame COVID. I blame that when we were inside during COVID, we allowed a new sector of people to come up that calls themselves influencers. And they became overnight experts at everything. Haven't done anything, but now they're experts. And since we're all sitting at home watching YouTube and on social media, influencers took over what I call legitimate business. And they're not running legitimate businesses. And I say it with confidence because I work with a lot of influencers, and people like me were brought in to help build the infrastructure and the business and the systems and make it viable. So once you have yourself stable, your core values, they become the core values of the business. They become the principles of the business. Once you have a life vision, now you can create a business vision. What do I want my business to do and become to support my lifestyle? I think that a lot of owners of businesses are accidental business owners, almost like an accidental landlord. I had a home, my primary residence. I decided to move to another residence, and instead of selling this one, I'm going to keep it. But I'm not a professional landlord, nor did I hire a property management company, and then it becomes a stressor. So now I'm working in a job and I feel like, you know what? I'm a great operator. I can run a business. I can do this for myself. You become an accidental business owner and you don't consider the marketing, the sales, the closing, the creating the products and the services, the team building, the leadership qualities you need to have. All of those things matter. It's not just about you being great at a task. And they skip right over that because they believe if they can grind hard enough, if I can put in enough hours, if I can do I can build a 7-figure business. And it's just not true. And let me caveat that. I've worked with some really great operators who built $2 to $3 million businesses, almost took them out. And they, most of the time, if they don't get help, they end up imploding.
Yeah. What would be the difference in that case, Tyrus, between building a business and just building just a really complicated job that has your name on it?
Business is all about repeatable processes and systemization. A business is something that can operate without you in the day to day, at the end of the day. It's when you can go on a 6-month vacation and not pick up the phone, and that business still operates, still brings in cash flow, still pays all the employees, and still services the customers and the clients. That is what a business is. A business is also an asset. Most of us go into business and we say this, oh, this is my baby. This is my baby. This is my business, my baby. Nobody can run my business like me. Nobody understands everything about my business. Well, number one, I like to call that just straight out. You're not the best. There are couple billion people on this planet. I guarantee you, somebody out there better than you at what you're doing right now. That's just a fact. Secondly, how are you ever going to scale it if you're the only one that knows everything about it? And that immediately triggers, have you even thought about your exit plan? What are you going to do in 15 years? What happens if you get sick? What happens if you go on a vacation? It is not a badge of honor to be the smartest person in the room. I don't want everybody coming to me asking me questions, because that means I haven't adequately prepared, trained, or took the things that are in my mind and put them on paper. And so that's the difference between a business that has the ability. Again, I'm not trying to tell everybody to go be a billionaire, but don't you want the ability, the opportunity to become that and decide? Or you would never have that if you don't systematize and build real business fundamentals.
Yeah. As you talk, it makes me think of a bottleneck. It's very common in business, especially with someone who didn't really have a plan going into it. Where does a founder usually find themselves as the bottleneck? Like, what areas are they normally in when they're bottlenecking their own business?
The number one, and this is if they're actually serving clients and customers and making some money, customer delivery or service product delivery. That becomes the bottleneck. They can only make so many pies in a day. They can only take so many calls in a day. They can only serve so many people in a day. So that's the immediate bottleneck. I just had a conversation the other night with someone talking about not being able to send out all the invoices. They were so busy, they didn't send invoices. And I worked with a company one time. I was in property management. And so I was at like 200 units managed at this point. And I had an appliance company that I worked with. Phenomenal work. It took 6 months for me to get invoices just because they're so busy. No system. No, and they had people, but no training. It was a hustle mindset, just hustle around. I would have to ask for invoices so I could pay them. And I see a lot of businesses get trapped in that. If you're focusing on service and delivery, who's doing the admin work? Who's doing the marketing work? And then sometimes they just let that go. Well, I just won't do marketing. I'll do referrals, friends and family. Do networking. Oh, I won't worry about my KPIs, my metrics, my numbers. I don't like that anyway. I don't like numbers. So they fall in love with doing the task that they know how to do the best. And when that takes all of their capacity, they become the bottleneck.
Yeah. And then they become an operator and not actually an owner, and they get stuck
Yeah.
in that operations. I want to move on a little bit to to fundability and get into all of like what you do. But before we do, you mentioned something a bit earlier that I'm very curious about. When we were talking about COVID, you said that was the time that the influencer came out. And the influencer is what it is not good or bad. But if I had to put my own subjective truth on it, like it's not great. It has not led to good places. But still, many people are going to go online. They're going to see a 5-second or I don't know 50-second TikTok or short and they're going to take that, whatever that person says at that time, as the truth, nothing but the truth, and the whole truth. How does somebody begin to delineate between what is good sound advice and what's just clickbait to get you to watch the next short?
Oh my gosh. Such a great question. And it pains me when I see entrepreneurs, founders, aspiring business owners, even everyday people watch a 30-second clip from someone with no title, no certification, no formal education, and they're trying to do that thing. How I ask owners to think about this is, when you hear something, just ask the question, why? You should set up infinite banking. Why? And when they go through that infinite banking spiel of life insurance and all of this stuff, why haven't I ever heard of that before? Well, only the wealthy do it, and it's a secret. I haven't sat down with one wealthy person that held secrets from me. And the answers I always got to all the questions were so basic, and they were out there and available. So I always just say, why? Oh, you can write off your whole vacation. Just have one business meeting and say you had a meeting. Why? Why is that possible? What law says I can do that? Because they don't know the tax code. Or they manipulate one sentence that they read to spin it in their way. And so I'm like, if this person knows so much about taxes, why aren't you a CPA? If you know so much about finances, why aren't you a financial advisor? If you know so much about life insurance and whole life and term and infinite banking and all these other different strategies with life insurance, why aren't you selling life insurance? Why aren't you licensed? And so if you really want to get at the root of what an influencer is saying, start asking why. And this isn't just my idea. My mentor taught me this in real estate. When we were running around talking about flips and wholesale deals in that era was, I made $100,000 on this flip. I made $50,000 on this wholesale. He used to say, well, show me the HUD 1. Today it's the alter statement. Back then it was the HUD 1 because sure, you could show $100,000 check on that flip. But when you go through that HUD 1 of all those expenses and everything else, some of the people made no money. They lost money on deals. So he always taught me to test. If you tell me you're making this kind of money and I should follow you, show me. I'm just like a bank. If I walk into a bank and say, hey, I'm doing 5 million EBITDA and I want a loan, they're going to say, well, send me your last 3 years tax returns. Verify. Everybody should be verifying the information that they receive. Even listening to me right now in this podcast, go fact check it. Fact check some of the things I say, and then go from there. Always verify.
I think that's so important, especially in this day and age. And it's never been easier to verify, to take a moment to check something, because at the end of the day, most influencers, their only job is to get you to watch their next thing, to like, subscribe, so they can get a little more AdSense.
And they'll
It's
be gone
hard,
in 5
especially
years.
Yeah. It's hard, especially as someone who is a financial advisor, like a licensed advisor, that like I can't, like I legally can't make the hookbait shorts. Like I wish I could. It would probably make my life a lot easier, but like you legally can't. But the person who has no training, they can go and say whatever they want because they're not held to any standards.
Absolutely.
So I want to stick on this just for one more moment. You mentioned that you worked with some of these influencers. Could you tell me some of the things that you saw, or some of the experiences, or what did you learn from working with them?
Some relationships much better than others. Some actually are building real businesses that they feel can help individuals. Great at understanding mindset. Most of these influencers had some foot in the MLM space. So they come through the multi-level marketing. That's where they cut their teeth at and learn how to sell. And what I noticed was they were in the same rat race. They were selling either repackaged information or regurgitated information. They would go and try to skip steps. So instead of learning real business foundations, fundamentals, and understanding how to build it, they would take pieces of it. And then they would just chop the rest up to hustle. You just got to hustle. If you move fast, you can skip it all. Like, it's almost like there was an analogy of, if you want to have your boss think that you're busy, just walk around the office really fast. Like, all you gotta do is just move fast, and they'll think that you're busy. And that's true from the visual. You think like, man, I see them online. They're always moving. They're in this location. But what I learned, that a lot of that was built on just false narratives. You and I can go do a photo shoot on a private plane for about $3,000 if we really wanted to do that. You and I could take a vacation and shoot the images. We can rent an Airbnb for a day and shoot that and pretend that it's ours. So I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of, you're actually not doing what you say that you're doing. When I start to get paid, take a long time for me to get paid.
Yep.
I'm not getting my money. You're doing all this stuff, but I'm not getting paid. And then I get in your books because you're bringing me on as a fractional COO. So now I'm like, okay, you're blowing a lot of money. You're not delivering everything that you promised. A lot of that stuff, I've had horror stories and seen horror stories of people not getting the product that they paid for. And then when someone like myself comes in, I'm trying to build this business out to operate like a business. Systems, processes, SOPs. They didn't like any of that. It slows me down. It's not a part of what we're doing. I'm like, well, you're not running a real business. Coaching. Like, everybody's not meant to be a coach. Everybody's not meant to be a speaker. Everybody's not meant to write a book. And so these are a lot of the things that they hook you on and that everybody believes they should be trying to do and emulate. Like, I don't know how many people have asked me, have you thought about writing a book? No, because I have no interest in writing a book to say I wrote a book, but not selling the book. If I'm going to write a book, I want to make it sell and make some money, not just to have it sitting up on my wall. Everybody can make their own choices, but I saw that really a lot of influencers really were chasing the views, and they were making money, but they weren't building something to keep money. My great-granddad used to say, money's harder to keep than it is to get.
Mm-hmm.
I've always known that. And so it's like, yeah, you made $10 million, but what do you have today? What are you building? What can you pass down? Can somebody buy this from you? None of those businesses can be bought. Private equity is not coming and saying, hey, so-and-so influencer, you got a great business, let me buy it. Or if you notice, those that have been bought out, like one recent influencer, like name, like image, got bought, and then the shares tanked. No real value.
What actually makes a business fundable?
Great question. So we have the investor definitions and we have the bank definitions, which are closely aligned. A fundable business is essentially a business with its ducks in a row, meaning you have a business plan. You have some tax returns. And even if you're a startup, you have some modeling or forecast. You have some level of systems, SOPs. I'm not talking about you got to have books. We're not talking about your 20-year business and you got all of you, but you have these things that fit where you are today. It may just be you selling one product, but do you have an SOP on how you do that one thing really well? Do you have a forecast of what I'm going to do next year, year 3, year 5? Do you have a backup? And what happens in this worst case scenario? Risk analysis. Do you have some sort of collateral or skin in the game? You as the owner, what is your experience? Because we know most of the time for startups, what makes them fundable is the owner. You're betting on that person to say that they can do this thing. So do you have the vision, and can you articulate that vision? Basically, a fundable business has a 10-page or 10-slide pitch deck that outlines all of these different things: product market fit, your plan, some level of traction, the owner bio, and then what are you going to do with the money, whether it's a bank or an investor.
And I'm going to assume, based off of the time that you spent with influencers and with many business owners, unfortunately, is that most of them don't have this, but they're just trying to hustle their way, or like you brought up at the beginning, work hard enough that it just works out. So, and then I'm assuming that most people, they think, well, the problem is if it's not working out, it's because I don't have enough capital. So how should business owners look at this, whether they need more capital or whether they actually just need better systems of operation, or just systems of operation in general, maybe not even better, maybe just actually have something documented.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend a business taking capital. If you've never taken capital before and you're a brand new owner, you don't even have any idea of how to deploy capital. And so that can be because capital only accelerates what's under the hood. If you have terrible systems, terrible business practices, capital is going to burn a hole through that and really show everything that you're doing. Then you're going to have mad investors or a bank coming after your collateral. You want to have foundation before you start bringing capital on. You want to know that you have product market fit, or you can see that you have something that's going to revolutionize something. And I don't even want to use revolutionize. I think that's overused. You're going to have something that's going to make impact. You're going to have some experience of how to do something really well that will say, if you give me capital, I can immediately deploy it. I say, Chris, the answer that I ask people when they say, well, I'm trying to raise capital, I need capital for my business, I ask them, for what? Most of them can't tell you.
Yeah.
But when you're taking capital from a bank or from investors, they want to know use of proceeds. What are you doing with that money? Is it going towards marketing? And if it is, do you have a marketing system or marketing plan? So you need that. Is it going towards hiring? And if it is, do you have a marketing plan? Do you have a training plan? Well, I'm just going to use it to get more products. Do you have a plan for that? Do you have a return on that? Do you know how long it's going to last you? And so when business owners come to me talking about capital, I start to ask them, okay, based on your use of proceeds, with 99% don't have, I kind of walk them through that. What are you doing with this money? And how are you going to translate that into revenue? That's the purpose. Capital isn't to run the business. In a way it is, but it isn't there to keep the business going. It's there to amplify the systems you have so you can generate revenue to grow. It's an accelerant. And most of us are using capital as a survival component. Oh, if I just had another $5,000, I can make it 3 more months. That's the mentality. No, I had an investor tell me, and this helped really structure my way of raising capital for our businesses and the way I think about capital. I went to him for 150 grand. He said no immediately. I gave him the pitch, everything. And so at the end, I'm gonna ask for feedback. I just don't get dejected and walk away. I said, okay, what could I have done better? What was it about the pitch? And he said, nothing. It was flawless. You didn't ask for enough money. $150,000 is not any amount of money to really scale a business the way you're talking. And he said, what you should do is go back and do the numbers for 3 years of operating expenses, financial projections. So if you don't have those numbers and you don't know what it takes for you to operate, you can't even do that. Once you get those 3 years, then raise that capital. Is it 2 million? Is it 3 million? Because to him, 150K wasn't enough to move the needle on his investments to get a real return to make impact. And he said, you'll be right back to me in a quarter asking for another 150.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that, but I knew that because I ran marketing campaigns with ad budgets of $200,000, $300,000. It goes away really fast.
Yeah.
I was running payroll at one point for 30 grand a month. So if I took 150,000, I got 5 months of runway, not including all the other things that I need to pay for. So it really boils down to doing the math and understanding what capital actually does for you versus just following the influencers. Go get a bank loan, go get $10,000 from Chase, go open up a business account. All these, I get the word strategy has a place, but when I hear social media talk about strategies, it immediately is a red flag. I did a whole podcast series on red flags. Strategies was a red flag. Running the play was a red flag. The game was a red flag for me because when you have to break down and use lingo in order to operate, you're not operating under true business principles.
Yeah. And I really hope our listeners, what you just said there, it's so gold. It's so important because taking on capital, while it can amplify a business, it can take it to the next level. It is dangerous. It is fire. You are playing with fire. You're playing with live ammunition, and you could do what you need to do with it. But if you don't have a system and you're hoping that this money will help to create the system, I've seen it take down too many people. It's just like playing with debt. It is debt. It is playing with debt. It's the exact same thing. There's no difference. Just people, when they do it personally, they say, "Hey, I'm taking out this credit card to go buy this thing." People will say that's dumb. But when they do it in a business sense, I'm taking out this debt, or I'm going to use this fancy term. I use the word leverage.
Leverage.
Now they're thinking like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to use this fancy marketing term for the word debt to go do this thing. But it's the exact same principle, just with one connotation, with taking out a credit card. You'd be like, that's dumb. But when someone says take out leverage on a business, people say that's smart. But both of those things can be dumb or smart depending on the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And to even cement this point more that you just made, I heard this on a webinar that I was on, and I looked it up and you can Google it, that most 30 under 30 founders that raise capital, these are the who's who. They're 30 under 30. Most who raise capital raise it under fraudulent pretenses.
Mm-hmm.
67%, I believe, number could be off, definitely Google it, of Inc. 500, 5,000 list makers go out of business after 3 years of making the list. Talking about the fastest growing companies. After they make the list, they go out of business. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of them raise capital, and that money's gone. It's not the money, it's the plan. And it's understanding how to utilize the tools that you have that make you successful or not. It's the difference between taking $400,000 to start Amazon and becoming what it is today.
Yeah.
It's all up to that founder and how prepared they are.
Yeah. I think about companies like Theranos, companies like WeWork, where they, would take a lot of money. And I've even worked for private equity companies that you meet the CEO and they have a great sales pitch. They sound great, but the moment you get under the hood and you actually join the organization, you're like, you literally know nothing. Like you're just
Yeah,
you're a con man. And like that's the way you. Like, I know it sounds mean, but like that's what they are. Like,
exactly. They're selling a story. They're great salesmen, but we've had snake oil salesmen since the beginning of time. And even when I think it was Rockefeller, I think it was Rockefeller, it could have been Carnegie, but one of their fathers was considered a snake oil salesman. And that's where he kind of got that whole premise of sales from and understanding that you can sell people things if you can convince them and persuade them. And so a lot of us, instead of building real businesses, is built on integrity and using selling and that process to grow people. We want to use it to take advantage of people and raise. And we see the stories. I mean, that's why the show American Greed exists. My partner always talks about American Greed. I'm raising this capital that I pay for my wedding, and I'm on my third cruise. Like, what are
yeah,
you doing? And so you really have to go into this business world with a why and a vision, first for you, but then bigger than yourself. Because when you start including others and make an impact for others, you're less liable. That means you won't do it, but you're less liable to get greedy and make it all about you.
I think this might be the perfect time to bring in Regulation CF for someone who's listening to that. For someone who might have heard me say Regulation CF, Charlie Foxtrot, and Yeah, I don't know what the hell that means. Could you explain that to our listeners? Like, what is it? Why is it both an amazing thing and in the wrong hands, one of the most dangerous things that we have available to us?
Yeah. So the Jobs Act that was passed in 2012, fully realized in 2016, allowed an exemption to be brought into the marketplace called the Regulation CF, which is equity crowdfunding. Most of the time when we hear about crowdfunding, we hear about GoFundMe's, we hear about Kickstarter. All of those things kind of came out around that same era. But what a equity crowdfund is, with a Reg CF, I can raise up to $5 million a year from both accredited and everyday investors. And I can do general solicitation, which means I can market it. The only caveats that I have are I have to use a broker dealer or a FINRA registered funding portal to host the raise. That means if I get the regulation, I can't go and sell it or give it door to door and I'm answering questions and you give me the money. It has to flow through an intermediary. What's so powerful about that is you can get your message, your vision, your story, your business out to the masses. It'll take a strong marketing budget, but the world can see it. If you put enough money into the marketing budget, you can do webinars, you can do live events, you can do all these things and actually talk about raising capital and send them to the portal page where they can read everything about your business and your Form C. Your Form C is the document that the SEC approves. They don't look at it and stamp it and say, hey, they just make sure you filed it. And as an investor, you go and look at all that information. Is everything about your business. Everything that we talked about today goes on the Form C. So if you don't have all of that, your corporate governance docs, your business strategy, your forecast, your financials, all of that goes in there. Your bios for the owners, everything goes in that Form C. As an investor, I can read it and say, you know what? This makes sense for me. I want to support you. And so it's very powerful for businesses because now we have an avenue where we can go and raise capital from the public and they can support us. A lot of people call it impact crowd fundraising because a lot of plat- people that we see on the platform, they're trying to make impact in the local communities and they want their communities, their customers to back them and give them ownership. This allows democratization of ownership into businesses for everyday investors who may not have that opportunity anywhere else. How it can be dangerous is if you go through all of this process and you just abuse the money. You don't give back. You don't put the money towards the business. Now, since you have to file annual filings, the SEC, they're looking at it. You're more liable to get caught and penalized, but people will not file them. That's one of the big complaints from the SEC now. People aren't filing their annual reports. People, these are businesses that, while they may be viable, they may not have that strong viability to last. They may not have a fully thought out exit strategy, so your money's tied up, and those are all risk factors that you have to think through.
Yeah. I think they're great, and unfortunately, as an advisor, I've seen quite a few people who get stuck in these things because majority of them, you can't just go and sell them. They're not like a stock. You
Mm-mm.
know, you're gonna have to ask to redeem your shares to get them out, and I've seen people get stuck in these things where, "Oh, we can't redeem the shares, we can't redeem the shares, we can't redeem the shares." And, I'm not gonna mention the name, but there's some companies out there that are running legitimate Ponzi schemes under Reg CF. Um, and they're just doing it for as long as they can and continue to pay themselves until they can't anymore. And there are actually some influencers, one notable one pretty recently, who got slapped by the SEC for it.
Yeah, it is again, it's terrible how we can have access, great tools, things that are meant to help, but then people just won't do the right thing. Some people just have to figure out how they can game the system. When if you spent all of that time trying to build a legitimate business that you spend trying to figure out how to game the system, you'll be great. Like all of these influencers that are trying to game the tax system. Yeah, keep gaming it. And that's a in one of our groups, someone came to us, and I can't even remember what it was. Oh, they were going to go get an SBA loan, and they're going to take SBA money and do something different with it. And they said somebody that told them did it before and nothing happened. And I said, look, it's like this. Do they catch everybody? No. But when they catch you, they make an example out of you. Why take the risk? Because when you get barred from that, you will never get another SBA loan. They bar
Yep.
you from those things for life. And that impacts everything else that you're trying to do, because now you show up at financial fraud. And when you get that on your record, it's hard for you to do anything in the financial industry. And so why risk it for the quick? I'm trying to get a couple 100,000 to go do some other things with it. It's like, just do the right thing. Utilize the exemptions the way they're supposed to be utilized. Do the reporting you're supposed to report, and get the investors their return. You will go much further doing that. And to your point, a lot of these companies don't have that plan, that strategy of how they're going to get the investors their money back. So that money's locked up. Then to your point, you have to try to figure out, how do you do secondary trading? And there's so many rules to
Mhm.
secondary trading. A specific person has to buy it at a specific time. And it's just too much. And so I know there are platforms that they focus on that. So there's an avenue. But as an investor, and even myself as an investor, when I'm looking at these investments and I'm doing my due diligence, you should do your due diligence. What is that? How am I gonna get my money back at the end of the day? I don't expect to get it back next year. But when we're talking year 5, year 6, year 7, what does that look like for me?
Yeah, and that's where our listeners really need to be cautious, because they have amazing stories. Some of these companies have amazing stories, and I feel like there's a lot of people, especially now with where we are economically. Ray Dalio kind of put us at like number 5 on a 5-step scale towards a revolution or change. This is the time where people start trying to get as much as they can, and your vision becomes very narrow. And let's get what we can right now as the boat is quote unquote sinking, and then we'll deal with everything later. But what you might do in the short term to make money often will not allow you to make money in the long term.
100%. And again, it goes back to that question of why. Why are you advising me to do this? Why do you push this so hard? Why should I take advantage of this right now? Because it may never come back around again. Like, just why? Like, explain it to me. And if you have an issue explaining it to me, then it's not the right fit for me. And for me, it's more important to give everyone all of the options, not just the option I prefer. So when I hear the guys that talk about investing in the stock market, and you're crazy if you're not in the market. Well, you're in the market, but why don't you tell us the other opportunities out there? It's not just the market. It's not
Right.
just large cap. Most people, when they talk about investing in the market, they talk about the top 5 companies in the market. They talk about Nvidia, they talk about Amazon, they talk about Tesla, they talk about Netflix. But what about all the small cap companies that are doing $100 million or less, that are still viable companies, that are growing and actually can grow more and get you a larger return? Why not talk about them? Because they're not really deep into it. They only know what somebody else told them. They may have made a couple of $1,000s, if that. Because again, as a listener, if you do your research, you can do the math. If I buy, now let's just say Tesla is at $500 a share. If I'm an everyday working person, how many shares could I really buy? 4? Spend 2 grand in the market? And now let's say it goes up to 5, 10. Well, how much money did I really make? Like,
Hey, 40 whole
four,
bucks.
40 whole bucks. So, the people who are getting rich off the market are the people who can I dropped 5 million in the market. Yeah, they can see their money move a little bit more. So all of this is getting away from the hype and really getting an understanding of what fits for you and where you are in life.
Tyrus, what else do you want to talk about here on the podcast?
I think I really just want the audience to get educated. I want to share one more thing that my great grandfather shared with me. Knowing his story, again, born in 1919, chopping cotton at 8 years old. He didn't learn how to read until he went into the army. Every day I used to walk by his house on the way to school, and he would say, learn all you can because you're going to need it. I think that built my thirst for education. I think what built my drive and my tenacity was my mom forcing me to do things, forcing me to be the master of ceremony at church programs, forcing me to memorize the welcome speeches and all that. I couldn't read it. I had to memorize it, forcing me to handwrite until my writing was neat for her, Chris. It wouldn't, well, it's not good enough for her. I had to write until it was good enough for her. I think all of those things built who I am today. And for the listening audience, I want you to just go back and think about what are the things that you may didn't like, but really help mold you? And how do you extract those things as your advantages today? How do they make you stronger, smarter, faster, better? How do you take an elite mentality? And I'll leave one more thing. I know I said one thing. Let me leave one more. I would challenge all the listeners, no matter where you are in life or what you're doing, at least start today on operating at a higher level mindset and giving everything you got. And when I say a high level, think about what does it take to be, and not saying you have to go do this, but what is the difference between a special operations person and everybody else? What's the difference between a Michelin star restaurant and everybody else? High performing formula racing teams, great doctors and surgeons, NBA players, the elite of the elite. What makes them elite? There's a combination of nature and nurture, but mindset is the common thread with all of them. You cannot be elite without an elite mindset. So my challenge to you is determine and figure out how can you become elite with your mindset. And no matter what you decide to do or what path you go down, you will show up at a high caliber level, and that will attract the right people to your vision, and it will repel the wrong people.
I have an answer for myself that I give people, but I'd love to hear it from you. What is an elite level mindset?
For me, it is going out, sharpening myself every single day, mastering the knowledge that I have of my craft and of myself, and giving the absolute best at what I'm doing. Martin Luther King had a great speech, might have been called a street sweeper. But one of the things he said, if you, a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo did art, sweep streets, and he gave all these examples. What he was saying was, be the best at what you're doing, not what everybody else is doing, because you might not be Michelangelo, you might not be any of these people, but you can be the best person that you can be and what you were born with. All of us are born with talent. Unlock that talent, nurture that talent, and be the best at that talent. I think about it at a granular level. I want the guy that's changing my tires at Ford to be the best he can be. Because if he's not the best he can be, he may miss a couple of boats. And then that's going to impact my life. I want to go to a restaurant and have that person be the best they can be because it's going to impact me. And I want to add respect to everybody because I know everybody is important, no matter what they do. And if they just take that mindset of, I'm going to show up and give my absolute best, and I'm going to continue to nurture my craft and build and get better, that's an elite mindset. It's never taking a day for granted. It's never settling. It's never just being just to be. It's, okay, I did great today. How do I do 1% better tomorrow? I'm not asking you to do 100% better. I'm asking you to get 1% better each day. And at the end of the year, you're 365% better.
Yeah. The aggregation of marginal gains,
Yep.
1% compounded, and it changes everything. You know, when I think of mindset, I really go back to Carol Dweck's work on a growth mindset. And when someone asks me that question, what is an elite mindset? It's the thought that you have the ability to grow as a human being. Like our brain is constantly myelinating, it constantly has the ability to grow. So for me, an elite level mindset is the thought that if I put in the time and effort, I will get better at things. I can get better at things. And just like you said, you may never be Michelangelo. You may never be as good of a speaker as Martin Luther King. You may never be able to dunk. But there's an old quote I've always liked is you can't make a racehorse out of a pig, but you can make a really fast freaking pig.
Absolutely. And that pig is going to do what that pig is supposed to do. And Dr. Miles Monroe used to talk about trees. And I'll use this. I gotta let you go, Chris. I keep you all night.
No, I'm
um,
enjoying it. Don't worry.
I love these analogies of not limiting yourself because, to your point in that book, mindset is the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. And most of us have a fixed mindset because we have limitations that we've allowed the world to put on of us. But in nature, there are no limitations. A tree is going to grow as tall as that tree is supposed to grow, the way it was designed. Now, can we as humans cap it? Yeah, if you put an oak tree inside of a house and you put it in a little pot, it won't be able to grow as much. If you take a well and put it in a tank, it's not going to be able to grow to where it's supposed to because it's not in its right environment. So, as a listener, are you in your right environment? Goes back to what we were talking about ecosystem. Have you grown to a point to where you need to break free so you can grow further and create that mindset of continuous growth? And for humans, and let me ask you this, Chris, how healthy do you want to be?
I want to be the healthiest I possibly can be.
And for your family, how well mindset wise, how happy do you want them to be?
I feel like happiness is a never, is a never ending journey, and it's certainly a choice. But as someone who struggles with depression and has never truly felt very happy for very long, that's the reason that I do all this is to try to show other people that you can grow, you can get better at it by practice. So for my family, I want them to be happy or I guess better word would be content,
Absolutely. How smart would you want them to be?
as smart as they can possibly be, the smartest they can get to.
So why is it with money we say, I just want to have enough? It's the only limitation. It's a limitation. It's not about having a lot of money. This is just about allowing yourself to do the best you can do and let money be a byproduct. Les Brown said that everybody talks about money not being everything, but everybody wants to find out for themselves. You
Yeah.
got to find out for yourself. And to your point, you will know where contentness is in your own life when you break free of limitations and just allow yourself to be. And that takes you to an expert level.
Yeah. And that kind of takes me back to my thought process goes to Taoism and just being with what is and doing with what is without trying to achieve something else. Just do and you'll achieve whatever you need.
Absolutely. I think we can have a whole conversation. We can keep the audience for hours because I was diagnosed with persistent depressive disorder. So I do understand that feeling of never really finding joy for long periods of time. I remember growing up where I would be happy for Christmas, as an example. And the moment, kind of when the moment was over, I couldn't even remember, like, why was I ever happy? And
Yeah.
so
The
I know
anxiety came back.
yeah, I know my mom went through a lot with just trying to figure out like what could she do, but it was out of her control. And back then we didn't have the tools and the resources and the education around these things. So if you're in the audience and you're listening, definitely seek professional help. You're not alone and you can still operate and grow with these they don't have to control you and be your life. They're a part. A lot of things are a part of life. I was medically retired. So I have a physical disability, but that's not my life. That is a thing that I battle, and I choose to get up every day and be the one that says, nope, you're not in control. I'm in control.
Yeah. I know we keep on saying one more thing, but I was going to bring one more thing. I think when someone's depressed, they use the word "I am depressed," and when you take that on as a part of your identity, it makes it much harder. If someone says, "I have cancer," you wouldn't say, "I am cancer," but just like depression, it's only a part of you. Like I have depression like right now, or depression is a season that's part of me. It's currently driving the car. That doesn't mean that everything else isn't also in the car, and anyone else of my emotions and my feelings can also take that wheel. And it's always there. But if we tell ourselves with the words that we use, "I am depressed," you take it on as part of your identity, and it begins to tell itself. So the words that we use are just extremely important. So for all of our listeners who are out
Absolutely.
there, you're not alone in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that was very good. Thank you for sharing that.
Perfect. Tyrus, where can the listeners come to learn more about you? And of course, we can link anything you want inside the description as well.
Yes, just simple. LegacyWealthCapitalGroup.com. Legacy Wealth Capital Group across all social media. If you just search it, you'll find us.
Thank you. And of course, that's going to be linked down in the description. Tyrus, after doing this podcast for many years, being an advisor for years, I found that, our title is obviously the FI guys, and FI stands for financial independence. And what I found over doing this for so long is that financial independence means very different things to different people. So, Tyrus, what does financial independence mean to you?
Financial independence for me, and I'm going to take this from a biblical perspective, it's not even for me. It's being able to leave wealth for my children's children. And so I have a goal to just make sure that I leave generational wealth behind, and I'm going to work to that. So I don't have a number. I'm going to give everything I can to make sure that they take away something. And that's not just money, it's also the ability to create, because we were put on this planet to be creators and to make things and not just be consumers. So for me, financial independence is knowing that I laid it all on the line in this life to make sure that the future generations could pick up the mantle with something. Doesn't mean I'm gonna be rich. I ain't saying I'm leaving them trillions, but they won't have to start from scratch.
I love it. And to our listeners, I hope you got value out of today. I hope you got value out of the wisdom and the words of Tyrus Shivers. And if you did, please leave a like, leave a comment, whatever the most important thing that you learned today is. And if you could do us this one huge favor, it's the only thing that we ask for the podcast, is take this description and send it to one person that needs the words, that needs the wisdom that was expensed to here today by Tyrus Shivers, because you don't know what one thing that was said today, maybe not said today, that can change somebody's life. So with that, Tyrus Shivers, thank you so much, or Shivers, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you, Chris.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.